I would be remiss if I didn't reference Back to the Future, and the DeLorean was what, 1.21 gigawatts, which is apparently nothing if PG&E is adding 15.
Absolutely. We need to build a lot more flux capacitors as well.
Absolutely. Hey there, this is Alastair, and welcome back to the Venture Variety Show. This podcast is where I talk with founders, investors, and operators, shaping how startups and the stories around them get built. For today, I'm joined by Aaron Panzer from National Grid Partners. Aaron and I talk about how NGP plans to invest $100 million into AI innovation. We discuss the massive energy build-out needed to support that growth, and we chat about what it'll take to power the future of AI. Aaron has a unique perspective. He sits between legacy utilities and next-gen startups, and he shares why he's still optimistic, even as demand for power keeps surging. So let's get into it and meet Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Tell us what you do at National Grid Partners, and excited to talk to you today. Excited for the conversation.
Oh, same. I appreciate it. So I head up venture acceleration within National Grid Partners, which is a part of National Grid, a utility company that is a British company at its core with utilities in the US and the UK. And National Grid Partners is the corporate venture capital and innovation arm of National Grid, really meant to be a catalyst to help drive us into the future, really meant to be this innovation arm. Within venture acceleration, I have two jobs, essentially. One being I head up something called the Next Grid Alliance, which plays a key role in really bringing a lot of the scoping of challenges, of opportunities to the forefront. We bring together 130 utilities from around the globe to have a very meaningful discussion as we face very common challenges across the board. And then the other piece is called commercialization. And commercialization is all about how do we develop technologies based off of these challenges that we hear? How do we scale up these challenges that we're not seeing startups or other companies address? And how do we bring them to the market to get this industry where it needs to go?
Well, that's great. And just remind me, how long have you been with National Grid Partners?
I actually just had my 2-year anniversary earlier this week.
Oh, okay. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you.
How long has NGP been investing?
Yeah, National Grid Partners has been around for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, we weren't necessarily seeing load growth from data centers, but now we are. But we were seeing that there was a need for a lot more clean energy. There was a need for more electric transportation and electrification of buildings. And we essentially said, a lot of technology companies are thinking about these challenges. How do we become part of the equation, and how do we help guide them a bit more around the challenges that we're facing and become more collaborative? And we saw one of the best ways forward that we can do that was by actively investing in startups, being a partner to them, helping get their solutions into our business, and also be an advisor to them as they're continuously thinking about product development of their solutions.
In March, National Grid Partners announced a commitment to invest $100 million in in startups that are focused on the future of energy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what was, because certainly you've invested in AI startups already.
Yeah, the purpose of the commitment is that you're exactly right. We have been investing in AI thus far. We have a few different portfolio companies within our portfolio that have been building out AI technologies for several years now. And we've borne witness to what the potential of AI is. And nowadays, as you've probably seen across all the conversations that you've had, you can't be a technology company without having some sort of AI strategy moving forward. And so we're really focused in on how do we continue to advance the way that we do business across the board. As you can probably imagine, just by being a consumer of energy, there's so much complexity to what it takes to actually deliver energy to customers all around the world. And so with all those complexities, whether it's technical, whether it's operational, whether it's regulatory or policy or legal, or what have you, there are so many ways that AI can impact our business moving forward. And so we want to be even more intentional about this. We've invested over $500 million throughout our life cycle, throughout the 7-year period. And we ultimately just want to ensure that what we focus on moving forward really has that focus on how do you advance the technologies that we're seeing? How do you do even more to help get us to where we need to go?
What are some examples of kind of the investments that we would see out of this $100 million?
Yeah, it's going to touch on many different areas. So a few things that come to mind that are maybe more core to the utility sector are things like system planning. And what we mean by system planning is how do you actually plan for the existing infrastructure that we have, these big transmission lines that sit all throughout, every single utility service territory, the distribution networks that connect power from these transmission networks that connect to generating facilities and back into homes and businesses, the distribution networks that connect distributed energy resources back into the wider grid so that when you're generating solar on your rooftop, that some of that power can go to your neighbors as well. So we need to think about system planning at all different levels. Again, with the grid that we have, we need to better understand how do we use AI to help us understand where we have capacity on our grid, how we can better optimize our grid. Historically, we built this grid with the intention of, you know, let's go off and understand what that singular peak period is of like the highest usage amount on the grid at one point in time. And that basically designs this grid, this massive investment around the notion that that you always have to be prepared for that one point in time in case it comes again. Well, there's a lot of what we call capacity, a lot of room to be able to bring a lot more resource onto our system during those times that aren't that peak time. So how do you plan for that? How do you think about utilizing that so that we don't just have to build billions of dollars of more infrastructure onto our system, which ultimately costs customers like you and me a lot more money? Instead, how do we better understand, how to best optimize that capacity? So that's one example. On the other side of the equation, there are simpler examples, like we've invested in a company called Luminance, which is focused on AI for legal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So as a utility, we obviously process a lot of contracts. And so how do we actually work through that in a much more robust fashion and to make us more efficient from a legal perspective? And there are all different types of use cases that you can think about across the utility on how do you utilize AI to make us better.
AI is also creating a demand for more energy. How can AI help manage its own demand? When we think about the energy footprint of AI itself, where are we headed in terms of, the challenges and scaling a sustainable AI infrastructure?
I look at the energy industry, and many people call it the greatest engineering innovation, the grid being the greatest engineering marvel of the 20th century, and it really is. And what we have as far as grid infrastructure hasn't changed over the last 100 years. Now we have AI, which some may argue, I'll probably be one of them that would argue that we have the greatest engineering marvel of the 21st century, and it's probably just going to go to mind-boggling levels that we can't even understand yet as far as what AI can potentially do. And so when you marry the two of them, there's not two industries that are as intertwined. AI is going to consume an astronomical amount of energy. We are going to have to build a ton of new resource in order to be able to meet the demand of the future. And we're seeing this pop up across the entire industry. For example, take PG&E. So PG&E has 77 gigawatts worth of what we call capacity being how much energy that you can provide at a singular point in time if everything was running all at once. And so 77 gigawatts today, they are planning on bringing on another, I believe it's 15 gigawatts, or that's what's in the pipeline, that's what's in the queue over the next several years, which represents, 20% of what they have from the last 100 years on the grid. which is just an astronomical number. So how do you ultimately meet how do you ultimately support that? And just for your audience, just to give some reference as far as what is a gigawatt. So the equivalency of like of 1 gigawatt is about 700 is you need 1 gigawatt to supply power to about 750,000 homes or 100 million LED light bulbs. So it's an astronomical number. You start talking about adding 15 more gigawatts just to PG&E's territory, it's enormous. So so AI is going to be this big drain, and the energy industry is going to be the enabler of whether or not AI gets to where it needs to be because it needs power. It's its lifeblood to be able to move forward. At the same time, AI is going to be the component that's going to enable us to figure out how to get there. How are we going to be able to better system plan? How are we going to think about material science that's going to advance things like battery technology so we can get to long duration energy storage? How are we going to solve all the problems that are going to enable us to be able to move towards that future?
Amazing. And I would be remiss if I didn't reference Back to the Future, and the DeLorean was what, 1.21 gigawatts, which is apparently nothing if PG&E is adding 15, right? You mentioned
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to build a lot more flux capacitors as well.
absolutely. Yeah, and on that note, you mentioned the need to build a ton more resources. Is it just power plants? What do we need to build?
We need to build, the simple answer is we need to build everything.
Mm.
So what's happening right now is the hyperscalers, the data center companies are scouring the globe to find out what utilities actually have capacity. Utilities have been building at moderate levels for the last few decades, but we haven't seen a jump in what we call load growth, meaning like more demand on the utility system in 20 to 30 years. And so what exists right now as far as availability of energy supply, meaning wind or solar or nuclear or gas or hydro, we only have so much supply. And while you've probably been hearing that renewable is growing throughout the country, what's been happening is that you've been seeing renewables come online, but fossil generation being decommissioned. So it's not just like you've been adding a ton of new capacity, you've been replacing a lot of capacity through the years. Simultaneously, you have aged infrastructure as far as the wires that take things from a generation facility, the transmission lines, bring them to a substation, and then bring them to what we call a distribution network to distribute that power to all different consumers throughout the grid. And so we need the combination of more infrastructure. And National Grid actually announced last year that we are over a 5-year period, we're a year into it, that we are deploying $75 billion of capital into building new infrastructure across our service territories in the northeastern US and in the UK. And you're seeing those similar news stories come from many utilities across the board because they understand that we can't just build the generation, we need to build a lot more infrastructure and we need to make more sophisticated infrastructure. At the same time, we're also looking at more infrastructure build in terms of battery storage at all different levels, whether it's for big generation projects or, at people's homes. And we're thinking about more solar being put on the grid at people's homes. All the while, we're trying to think about how do we leverage things like electric vehicle charging infrastructure and electric vehicles themselves to be assets for the grid.
It sounds like a massive undertaking. Are we going to get there? What does the future hold?
So first off, I'll say yes, it is a massive undertaking, and I think I put my wife to sleep with the complexity of it when we talk about it at the dinner table most
Sure.
days. But I'm an optimist. I believe that we're going to get there. I believe that things are going to get worse before they get better. And what I mean by that is that data centers have money. Data centers have demand, and data centers are in this geopolitical race. They're in this competitive race, and everybody understands that if people are fighting to be the standard bearer of where everything goes as far as AI. And so with that, as people are just going to put more money into it, well, if utilities can't build the transmission infrastructure quick enough, or, solar developers and wind developers can't get through bureaucracy quick enough at local levels, bureaucracy that was put in place for a good reason, environmental reviews as one example, then they're going to have to figure out some other way to get the lifeblood that they need, the energy resource that they need in order to power their centers. And so they're going to get creative. And that's why you're seeing things like Microsoft coming up with a plan with 3 Mile Island. You're seeing folks like Google talking about building their own SMRs, and other hyperscalers talking about investing in natural gas and natural gas facilities. Well, nuclear obviously has some questions with it as far as what do you do with nuclear waste, but as far as gas facilities go, we're talking about putting more carbon into the atmosphere. And so if we want to ultimately get to the point of a clean energy economy, then we're going to see pain in the shorter term as these hyperscalers are focused on this. But I do believe that there's going to be a point in time where we ultimately see the value of AI, and it's going to help improve and accelerate everything that we do in this space. Take, for example, and I alluded to this earlier, battery storage. Right now, we don't have reliable long duration energy storage, which can ultimately put us in a place where we can count more so on things, on intermittent energy resources like wind and solar. We don't just, right now, when those are generated, we have to rely on them when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. Well, if AI can help us with the computations to better understand the material science piece of the equation, then maybe we can get to long duration battery storage sooner, and that can help us solve some problems.
One of the messages I took out of what you just said is you're optimistic. You're you see a path with AI and energy, and in the short term, long term, you're optimistic.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. Personally, I believe that there are both pluses and minuses that are going to come with AI, and there are going to be challenges that we have to navigate. For example, like every other industry, we're going to have to think about if we do have more sophisticated system planning, or we're able to collect data in an easier capacity, or, at some point in time, AI gives us the ability to leverage robotics to do some really dangerous jobs. What does that mean for the people that were doing the jobs? Well, there are going to be ways to rethink like how to deploy people to do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't yet know what all of that looks like. But as we move along, we want to be sensitive to the fact that like this could impact not necessarily jobs as a whole, but the way that people do their jobs. And so that's going to be one of the more fascinating things that we have to pay attention to and figure out as we make AI more prevalent in our day to day.
As we wind down here, I'm thinking I'm going back to the original question I brought up about the $100 million commitment to AI innovation in the energy world. I mean, what's the status of that? That's going to be over, I imagine, over a couple of years. What's the outlook with National Grid Partners as it deploys that capital?
Yeah, it'll be over the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are going to be really focused in on those startups that bring that next level of technology to us. And we're going to be looking at, things that are closer to our fingertips, certainly like, AI as it's put today, but then also thinking forward to, well, what does the world of robotics look like? What does the world of AGI look like? And some of that stuff may be a little bit further out, but we're also not afraid to invest a little bit further out just to learn. So, and what I mean by investing a little bit further out is there are going to be practical solutions that can help our business today.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are ones where we just want to understand how some startups are thinking about this and where the industry's going. As an example, we're not deep into the world of carbon capture yet, but about a year ago, we invested in a carbon capture company because we want to better understand, we want to learn about carbon capture and that space, and how can it impact our business? How can it help us achieve some of our long-term goals and initiatives within National Grid?
Excellent. Any final thoughts then, Aaron, as we wind down?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot, and I'll just reiterate that I'm
Yeah, please.
optimistic. I would say that, you know, we are intertwined. the world of AI and energy. And we're going to see astronomical levels of load growth, which are going to both be a challenge and an opportunity for this industry. We are incredibly excited about figuring out how AI can impact our business from the standpoint of just touching on every last facet of our business, things that are both unique to the energy and utility space, but things that are more general to industry as a whole. And then we are excited about sort of getting to that other side of the chasm of basically saying, well, this may set back some goals, like some clean energy goals that we may be looking at in the nearer term. But in the longer term, I do think that AI is going to be an enabler to help us solve a lot of these greater challenges.
Great. Sounds wonderful. And then the last question is, if a founder or a startup is interested in getting a hold of someone at National Grid Partners, what's the best route?
Yeah, the best route. First off, they can reach out to me, and we have a website called ngpartners.com. So look me up on LinkedIn, look me up on that website, and just reach out. We're always excited to chat with more folks. And we've got an incredible team of investors. We are, just to give a shout for our team, I personally believe that we have the best team of investors within the utility space globally. And so we're excited to work with really innovative startups and really innovative founders that can help us get to where we want to go.
It was great to talk with you and learn more about AI and the big utilities and how they intersect. So thanks for the conversation, Aaron Panzer from National Grid Partners.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
That was Aaron Panzer from National Grid Partners, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation. A few things stuck out for me there, including the scale of what's ahead for energy infrastructure and how AI can actually help manage its own demand. So if you like this episode, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and share this podcast with someone you know who might also enjoy it, and that'll help my show grow. If you're watching on YouTube, check out my other podcasts I do in collaboration with AInews.com called The AI Cognitive Shift. In that podcast, we explore how AI impacts society and the future of work. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time.